Rick Bozich from WDRB.com joins us now. Rick has been a busy man covering Louisville, covering Indiana. But I did turn around at the first IU game and was shocked and I'm like, oh, hell, that's Eric Crawford. Eric Crawford was there. I'm like, wow, they sent the A-team. Or Rick, or I should have said Rick Bozich's driver.
Yeah, that was last Friday night. Eric wanted to go up for the Marion game. He did a TV story on the first men's game after the passing of Bob Knight. So yeah, he wanted to go up that night. So he went up, and I was there last night, and I think I'm coming back Sunday for Army. So we'll have you covered at IU basketball.
A lot of people probably a little nervy last night. First game didn't go exactly like people thought it might with a runaway win because they're playing a team that you haven't heard of. But it doesn't matter. These guys are still Division I athletes. Number one, number two, they're playing their ass off because they're getting to play in Assembly Hall against Indiana, and they're getting to do it early. And sometimes things just go right. And my God, Florida Gulf Coast, I think they could have shot a three-pointer from Fort Lauderdale and it would have gone in. They were at draining threes. At one point they were at like 50%. And it was crazy, but yet they could not get ahead of Indiana until they did. And then Mike Woodson called that timeout. And then, man, you want to talk about a change for Indiana. That's when the game completely turned around.
Right. I mean, I'll give credit for Florida Gulf Coast. I think they have 8 players back from a decent team. We all know that Pat Chambers is a very solid coach. He did good things at Penn State. He was always hard for Indiana to beat when he was at Penn State. And they had a style of play, and they stuck with it. I mean, they had 24 field goals, and 13 of them were threes. They were going to try and beat Indiana by shooting perimeter shots. And you saw in, I think it was the Marion exhibition game where Indiana gave a bunch of threes. So that's got to be high on the list of things that Mike Woodson needs to work on is defensive rotations and not overhelping and, figuring out the switching and all that stuff. But I think you benefit from playing games like that. You're better to play a game like that than you are to beat somebody by 30 points because you learn, which guys are going to pull it together when the situation looks a little bleak. And it looked bleak when it was 48-42. And I think there was a little bit less than 11 minutes to go. And that's when Woodson went to the 3-guard set. And Indiana immediately proved offensively and defensively. They scored the next 6 possessions and took the lead, a 14-0 run. And defensively, with 3 guys out who can defend on the perimeter, they made it harder for Florida Gulf Coast to get those open looks. So, and Ware played better than I thought he would. He had a double-double plus 3 blocks and 4 assists. He's a good passer. He's a good player. I mean, I think if Mike Woodson really can get him to all the way buy in, he's got a chance to be a really good player. He's different than Trace Jackson Davis. He's not going to be Trace Jackson Davis, but he can do some things Trace Jackson Davis couldn't do, and that's step away and shoot threes. And he's a longer guy where Jackson was a really good shot blocker. Ware could be just as good, if not better.
Yeah, he's more athletic, has more length, and I've said this a lot today already, but I think he's sneaky. It's hard to be sneaky at 7'2", but he is because the guys that are coming in that are being defended by somebody else, they're trying to get in and around that defender, and then all of a sudden, here comes me in the middle with a broomstick, swatting your shot away, and that's what it was like. But just having that presence is going to help Indiana defensively because teams have to deal with that around him, even on the guys that aren't being guarded by him.
Yeah, what did he play? 36 minutes, 37 minutes? It was a lot. He and Galloway played almost all the game. He's going to have to get stronger. Cliff Marshall's going to be critical in this and get him stronger, because once he gets in the Big Ten, he's going to be going against strong physical guys. He's going to have to be able to hold his position on the block defensively and be able to power through and score offensively. That's, to me, one of the big growth areas for him. But I know that I talked to at least two of them, one scout from the Spurs and one scout from the Heat. There were at least, I think, 4 NBA scouts there last night, and they're there to look at Ware and Mackenzie Mbako. So he's on the radar, and he's got a chance to be a really good player. So that was encouraging. Renew played pretty well. 1 rebound is disappointing, but he made the big driving basket out of the timeout that got the momentum going the right direction. Galloway was solid, 7 for 9. You'll take that almost any time. Xavier played better in the second half. And as I wrote about, Gabe Cupps, I thought was a different maker for a guy who only had, 1 basket, which was a huge 3, which gave him the 11-point lead, made both of his free throws, had a couple steals. When he was in the game, they just looked like a team, like, okay, there's a leader. He's getting them going in the right direction. And the kid, I mean, he's fearless, and he looks like he's a 7th-year senior in terms of his poise when he's out there. I mean, like he's just a basketball player. He's not going to play in the NBA, but he's going to be a really productive college basketball player at Indiana for 4 seasons.
He reminds me in somewhat of Jordan Halls, but a little. I hate this to say this, but a little better. I'm not saying he's a better shooter right now. He just seems to have he's got a better toolbox. He can do more already.
Better defender than Halls, yeah.
And he's doing it already. Coming in as a freshman, which that's a great sign. Rick's piece right now out on WDOB.com.
He's a athlete. The thing about him is, if you watched him, he has that right arm out there like he's trying to guide the defender. And, it was annoying the Florida Gulf Coast players. I saw a couple times guys were like trying to slap his arm away. Yeah, and he wasn't going away. I mean, it's obvious to him that it's obvious to me that he's a kid who understands all parts of the basketball game are important. There's some guys that get a lot of their acclaim because they can score. But Gabe Cupps isn't going to be a 20-point per game guy. Even when he starts in a year or two, he might only be a 12 or 13-point per game guy. But he's going to be a complete basketball player in every way. He didn't make any dumb plays. That one steal he had down by the baseline against a bigger guy was that was impressive, I thought. I mean, Woodson, said it in the post-game press conference. There's a reason he's wearing the Indiana uniform because, I thought he's a winner. He's a basketball player.
I hate to say this, but Archie Miller began the recruitment of him, I believe, correct?
I think so, yeah, under Brian Walsh.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Brian Walsh the credit there, without question. No doubt.
He's from the Dayton area.
Yeah, a great one. He's just his comfortability is just amazing. It just looks like it doesn't matter what the score is. It doesn't matter how much time's on the clock. It doesn't matter who they're playing. He is just locked into his own box and is able to keep the outside noise out.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell last year that he's all in on Indiana too, because after he committed, he was at more games than he missed. He was playing his high school season, and he was always there sitting behind the bench. And I would think he would be a guy that other guys would want to play with because he's not hunting shots. He's going to if you do what you're supposed to do and you get open, he will get you the ball. And that's the kind of point guard I think a lot of guys would play with. Now, some games I'm sure he's a freshman. He'll have some bad games, and physically there'll be players who'll be able to take advantage of him. But overall, I mean, he's a really good addition to this team, and the way he played last night, he made a difference. He really did.
Well, and just like if someone handed me or you the keys to a Lamborghini, there's probably going to be a learning curve. Mm-hmm. That's what I think of when I think of Mackenzie Mbako. He has got that kind of talent, but at the same time, he has to learn, all right, how to drive this Lamborghini and to navigate the roadways and everything else, because right now he's got the speed and he knows how to hit the gas pedal, but he's got to be able to control that thing. And that's where he has some learning to do.
Yeah, I thought in the first half he played pretty good defense. In the second half, I think he got lost on a couple of plays early on, and he only played 2 minutes in the second half. I mean, Woody pulled him, and he didn't get back in the game. But the good sign was that he was on the bench, and he wasn't pouting. He was engaged, cheering, standing up, and all those things. So that was a good sign. But you're right. He's got skills. He just has to learn how his skills will effectively translate into what Indiana's trying to do offensively. And it was just a 1-game sample, but the offense just seemed to be more cohesive when they had 3 guards instead of 3 big guys. That's Mbako, Renew, and Ware is a pretty big front court. I'm not sure how totally complementary playing all 3 of those guys is.
Yeah, and having the 3 guards out there that's not the unit I think that any coach, Mike Woodson, maybe even expected to not only have on the floor, but to be so successful.
You thought it would be Gunn?
Well, I mean, just as far as if they were going to go with the 3 guard lineup, yeah, just because it gives you some range and shooting, but his shooting is still, he's kind of forcing it a little bit still, it looks like. Yeah. And defense, he's got to get up to speed. Woody said that last night, that not only CJ, but Caleb Banks and McKenzie.
Yeah, I mean, Gunn just needs to have a good game at some point. I think he's really putting a lot of pressure on himself and pressing and to make threes because everybody believes he's a good shooter. He just hasn't shown it yet in a game, other than I think he made a couple threes in one of the exhibition games. And he'd be if he can figure it out and get going the right direction, it'd be a big positive because of his size. He gives you a 6'5", 6'6" guy who can, either guard a small forward or a 2 guard. So that they're going to need him at some point to contribute. But it didn't happen for him or for Banks or for Mbako last night. Even for Anthony Walker, he started out okay in the first half, but he took a couple really bad shots, I thought, that's not part of his toolbox. And Woodson said it after the game too, and I believe it is that was a game they could have used Peyton Sparks to give Malik Renew a little bit of break here and then, because he is a guy who can score on the block.
Yeah, and it would have been interesting to see him and what he can do. Indiana is going to have a few more games, Army, in addition to
Wright State.
Wright State, who they play. But they've got to get these things worked out quickly, because the level and talent is going to rise immensely when they arrive in New York City in about a week and a half.
Yeah, I saw UConn blew out their first opponent, and they're good. They, even though they lost 3 starters, I think, from the national championship team, they've still got players,
which says a lot.
Right, and that'll be a difficult atmosphere to play in because UConn fans are a lot closer to New York City, and they're used to traveling to the Garden for the Big East tournament. That'll be a pro UConn crowd, so that'll be a tough game for Indiana for sure. But our Army's not quite as good as Florida Gulf Coast. Sunday night, Woodson should be able to give more guys some time and figure out a few more things. Wright State's probably, I don't know if they're as good as Florida Gulf Coast, but Wright State will be a tougher game.